Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in St. Louis and a pleasure to see so many longtime friends. Also to see the various worlds that I touched and that have touched my world. I met someone that I was in Israel with in 1986 on a teacher training program, people from 3 generations at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum of Teachers. I met people who interviewed for us at the Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation, long time and I would dare say old-time friends. Let me do 3 things this evening with you in a very simple order. I want to first begin with words of praise. I then want to go through the challenges that we face. And I want to conclude by talking about where museums have to go in the future, which is also to celebrate the direction in which you're going. If the middle part, you know, there's an old joke but to understand this, you have to be our age and understand what a telegram is. And my kids always tell me that there are what we call, technology natives and technology immigrants. And I am on the borderline between the native and the immigrant, but I'm still old enough to remember what a telegram was. The old Jewish telegram was start worrying, letter to follow. And that's what the middle part of my speech is going to be about, but I want to say that I had a student who did an MBA with the idea that business, and this speaks of our climate today, that if businesses can anticipate a problem, they can handle it. And if you anticipate a problem and you grapple with it, you can ultimately handle it. And therefore, I want to present you the problems. First, words of praise. I first came out to St. Louis in 1978 to see the early version of your attempts to build a local Holocaust institution. And it was enormously important to us when we were creating the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and we began with the President's Commission on the Holocaust in 1979. Before, the idea was that there be a museum, and here we had the model in St. Louis of a community that was seriously absorbing and grappling with the problem of the Holocaust and seeing it as a fundamental tool in the battle to teach values, to teach about the precariousness but also the preciousness of freedom, about the fortitude that it took to defend freedom in the wake of its fragility, about tolerance, pluralism, and about the role of the Holocaust. And since then, I've always kept my eye on St. Louis, and I've been to various iterations of the museum and its exhibition. And St. Louis was a pioneer, St. Louis was a model, and St. Louis has done a remarkable job which had national inspiration to all of us. And I say that without the slightest exaggeration. Plus, as an American who has lived on both coasts of the United States and in the south of the United States, I am always amazed with, and I just finished working on the museum in Skokie, and I felt that we had a very unique problem in Skokie. I felt that I was on vacation half the time on working it because people's yes was a yes, their no was a no. They concentrated on getting the problem solved, and egos did not interfere in the way in which we were productive. Now, being able to do that meant that instead of wasting millions of dollars, we were able to spend millions of dollars wisely. And I have always been impressed with how deeply honorable and wonderful the middle part of America is. And for that, I'm always grateful to be in the middle of this great country. Third praise, which is the most serious of all. We are at a crossroads in time. We are literally the last generation to live in the presence of survivors. May take 10 years, maybe if we're lucky it's 30 years. But the end is in sight. We are going to make a transition from living memory to historical memory. And the transition from living memory to historical memory is going to be awesome, because you're not going to have people who are going to be speaking and say with the authority of "I was there, that's my story." Now, we have to recognize what survivors have done. And I want to put what survivors have done in the largest context imaginable, which is to place them in Jewish history and Jewish memory. And the reason that's the largest context imaginable is we are the only people, together with the Chinese, who narrate our history in millennia. Right? When we sit down and we say we were slaves in the land of Egypt, we're talking about 3,250 years ago. When we talk about beginning the journey in Egypt, we're talking about 3,600 years ago. We're the only people who narrate our history in millennia. Survivors have had an incredible achievement in this generation. The achievement they've had is the following. They have essentially taken their story, they have bequeathed it to the world, and they've used it as a tool, and I would dare say as a sledgehammer, to deepen human conscience, to enlarge human responsibility, to plead for human dignity, and to cry for human decency. And they've done so in a way that answered retroactively the reason that they survived. Most survivors will tell you the only reason they survived is a 4-letter word, 3 letters of which are UCK, but the first is the all-important letter of L. And the reason they survived was luck, and in that they're telling you a little bit of a half-truth, because they also brought enormous skill and fortitude and the ability not to be panicked by the extraordinary circumstances in which they faced. But they couldn't answer the question, why did I survive when nobody else did from my family? What we've seen in the last 30 years is they've been able to answer it not with why they survived, but what they did with the fact that they survived. What they made of the accident of survival. And they made it in a number of ways. Number one, they did not allow their experience to destroy them and to defeat them. Part of what they did in every community throughout the United States is to rebuild, to bring a new generation in, to witness children and grandchildren to create. But more importantly, they began to take what they experienced and they transformed themselves from victims into witnesses. And they used it to enlarge the moral scope of humanity. In so doing, they have transformed the Holocaust from the memories of a bereaved community into one of the giant moral tools for teaching values in the world today. And they made it such a powerful experience that it reached corners of the earth that you cannot imagine. I was in Rwanda in 1994. And I was in Rwanda in 1994. I was invited by the government of Rwanda